Hi there, and welcome to the show that's all about celebrating all the shapes, sizes, and colors of diversity as well as adversity, and seeks to inspire the world through authentic conversations that are both meaningful and relatable. Each episode, I deep dive into the extraordinary journey of an average yet super incredible person in the diversity space. We talk about everything from their personal accomplishments and or contributions to social impact to some of the adversity they've had to face along the way and the resiliency and tenacity that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Tisha Gillespie, and this is Not Your Average Goat. This week I sit down with my friend Madeline, who also happens to be the creator of the Not Your Average Goat logo. We talk about her long journey with overcoming shame, especially as it relates to her Bolivian and Honduran roots, and the impact that her Mormon upbringing, wifery grooming, and unrealistic expectations as a first-generation Hispanic had on her. Then we dive into her super painful 12-year journey with two hormonal conditions, including endometriosis, and her experience going undiagnosed and mistreated for over a decade, and the huge pitfall that exists in our medical system today, especially as it relates to women's conditions getting a lack of care, especially when it comes to male doctors. And throughout this entire conversation, we talk about how Madeline exemplifies how important it is to think for yourself and challenge commonly accepted philosophies, and how powerful therapy, especially culturally competent therapy, can have in ridding shame and helping you work through so many issues that were out of your control throughout your childhood. I am so excited for you to hear Madeline's story, so let's get started. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. It's actually a beautiful 75-degree day here.
Yeah, over here in Texas, it's about 100 degrees.
That's crazy. Well, definitely keep sunscreened up for sure. As many people know, Not Your Average Good is a pretty new podcast. And with new podcasts, you need branding. And that's not really my expertise at all. So I reached out to you and you so kindly offered to help me with my logo, and just, some of the script and really kind of help put that brand narrative together, which I was so thankful for. So, thank you so much. And everyone can see the logo. It's on all the social media sites, on the website. What do you love most about being in this field?
I would probably say just the creativity with it has been super fun, and working with a lot of people. You know, I get to work with a ton of departments and help every single one. And I feel like it's in my nature to just want to help people and make them happy. And so I get to do that all the time, just in a creative way, and use my expertise with it. So it is a lot of fun to do.
So cool. And something I love that you have on your LinkedIn is your tagline is designing with empathy, which I thought was just so awesome. What does that mean to you?
It's really getting the people's needs and making them happy, and figuring out what they need first, and their pain points, and making sure we can come up with a solution that's okay for them. But yeah, no, I mean, I try to think not just design wise, but anything with empathy. I think the world needs a little more empathy, and me being able to design with empathy and use my expertise with it, and just to make sure that everyone is okay around me, it's just a really cool feeling.
One thing I love to do with everyone, because I think it's so interesting to kind of take a step back, is to go back in time a bit and find out who you were around 8, 9, 10 years old. What were your passions? How was your personality different from today?
I was pretty creative early on. I started cooking at a really young age, probably about 4. So, and I watched a ton of Food Network too. I would make my mom take me to the grocery store and buy ingredients I could make everyone dinner that night. So
That's so fun.
Yeah, always into cooking. I still am. And then really into art too. Like, I was usually drawing, or either if I wasn't drawing or cooking, I was probably outside playing, or riding my bike. But I was just, yeah, like a really active kid.
I actually had a baking book that I would love to like make cookies and cakes
Oh,
from. I
yeah.
don't do that a lot today. I wish I had time to do it because I miss doing it. And now there's just so many, I think so many innovative recipes and just like healthier ways too of baking. Cause of course, like when you're a kid, you don't really care about all the sugar and stuff like that. And then also just I until I was about maybe 9 or 10, I was a very outdoorsy kid. Like loved playing kickball, loved riding my bike, just like playing tag with all the kids in the neighborhood. And then I just got to a point where I just like did not go outside. And maybe it was like just like the normal teenage girl thing to do. I don't know. But I just like would end up like staying indoors like all summer just reading. And like I remember having to be like forced to go outside, like even to just like sit on a blanket to get sunlight when I was a teenager. But
Totally.
yeah, I definitely wish I was a little bit more kind of like kid like and like I like thankfully I have the two dogs. So they get me outside multiple times a day for a walk. But I don't remember the last time I rode a bike or played kickball. Good times though. But you actually grew up in a military family and you moved around a lot. You were actually born in Germany. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, it's funny. Anytime I tell someone I'm born in Germany, there's like two questions. They're like, "Oh, tell me your favorite part," and then, "Do you speak German?" And I was only there for like maybe less than 2 years, so I don't even remember it. It's just like it's more of a burden than anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's actually like a lame story because it's like I don't remember anything. My brother remembers more of it because he was about four. And then yeah, so my first native language was Spanish and English, so no German.
That's so funny. And do you ever have you been to Germany since you left as like I guess as a toddler at that point?
Right? Yeah, no, I haven't been back. And it's funny because I was told to go back before I turned 18 to get dual citizenship. And at the time as a teenager,
Mm.
I'm like, why does that matter? And like, I didn't care about it. Now I'm like, oh, like that would have been so cool.
That would have been so cool. Yeah. But then you also like spent a ton of time in California, in Kansas, and like
Oh yeah.
Virginia, and now you're in Texas. Like what was your favorite like what was your favorite place to live?
I remember Southern California being my favorite as a kid. Uh, we lived in two different cities in California, so I had to move twice.
Mm.
But the first place we were in was Tustin, California. I remember being very, very close to family, like a lot of extended cousins and aunts and uncles. We were still close when we moved to Seal Beach, but we lived on base in Seal Beach, and it was about maybe a mile, 2 miles away from the beach. So we used to go there every weekend. We were my elementary school that I went to I'd walk to, and it was always a beautiful day. And that was when we had a park right next to our house. So I was always outside. But yeah, no, Southern California was beautiful. We tried to do everything there. And so a lot of my fun memories were definitely there. Then after about 7 years of that, I moved to Kansas, which is like landlocked. Wasn't used to it, the non-diversity. So it was like a huge culture shock for me. And it was just so different. Like there wasn't as much things to do. There wasn't a lot to see. Kansas is very flat. Like I'm pretty sure they proved scientifically it's flatter than a pancake. So like those are like the cool things about Kansas.
That's too funny. And you were there from like 11 to 15, or sorry, 11 to 16. So like primary years, like where you want to be out, like actually doing things as a teenager and it's not a
Yeah.
lot to do.
And we were talking about how like I was always outside. When we moved to Kansas, I became totally like an inside kid. I didn't even want to go out there. I was like super depressed my first year. I was like this.
Oh,
I had yeah, and then we moved during like summer vacation normally. So it's like a whole summer vacation alone. And then you go to school and it's like you're already in eighth grade. People already know each other. Like,
yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of like you're fighting like to try to see someone that like doesn't believe in clicks. Yeah, so I remember, yeah, that first year was really tough in high school. But I did end up making like a pretty solid friend group in high school. The unfortunate thing was I had to move again my junior year of high school.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so we had seen it coming. My dad had to move my sophomore year, and he tried to extend it to where we could stay through so I could graduate with all my friends. So he sacrificed and went over to Virginia first for a whole year, out in West Springfield. And he was there. We were over here. I was doing my sophomore year. My mom was still working. My brother was already in college, and it was a really hard year on everyone, just because the toll that I saw it took on my mom being away from my dad for so long, and vice versa. You know, I'm sure my dad was suffering too. We didn't get to see him. Maybe like once every 3 months he would try to come visit because he was also busy working. And so, but we've been used to it before being away from him, because there'd be years where he would have to go to training and he'd be gone 6 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year, and it was just me, my mom, and my brother. But for some reason, it hadn't been a while since he did it, and so doing it, I guess, when we were all adults was a bit harder. And so my junior year had came and I had finished it, and my parents asked me if I wanted to still stay, and I was like, there's no way we can stay. Like, I saw what it was doing to my mom, and I was just like, if I don't make the decision to finish high school in Virginia, who knows what's going to happen to my family. Like, long distance relationships are tough. And I was like, 2 years of it, when you're already an established family, it was just rough to see. So I told him, I was like, no, let's all go to Virginia. I'll finish my high school there. Don't worry about me. But when I was going to school in West Springfield, I ended up finding like two of my best friends that I have, still today.
That's so
So
awesome.
yeah, if I didn't move, I would have never found them. And it was a little tough. I will say, going in senior year to a brand new high school, especially because my Kansas one, the graduating class was about 200. It's a small school. And then my my West Springfield one, I think was like 1,000 or like 1,500 or something. I was not used to the amount of people around me, how big the school was. It was like a whole different thing for me. But we made it. I can definitely thank my best friends for getting me through that last year.
Well, you've already hinted at this a bit, but your parents are not US native. So your father's Bolivian and your mother's from Honduras. What kind of values did they instill in you being Latino, kind of growing up? Were there any specific things that they taught you from their cultures?
Oh man, I will say, growing up in America with immigrant parents, it's very different because you're trying to be like all the normal kids and kind of like, hang out with everyone, do your own thing, sleepovers and all that stuff. And that just like wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing for us. I wasn't necessarily allowed to go out with certain people. If I were to hang out with certain people, it would have to be, they would have to know their whole entire family, everything that they did. Like, it was very protective. And so there was definitely that, sort of in the back of my head anytime I met someone. I'm like, okay, like, are my parents gonna like you? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it was very like that. I had to think that way. Would I necessarily agree with it today? Probably not, because it was a bit strict at times. But yeah, no, I mean, other than that, it was very always family first, family forward, no matter what. And I definitely got to learn a lot of my great cooking too from from knowing my roots. So
Do you have a favorite like Bolivian or Honduran dish that you like to cook?
salteñas are a huge Bolivian staple, and they
Mm,
are delicious. It's if you've ever had an empanada, it's
yes.
very similar concept, where it's like a bread and then there's stuffing inside. So a salteña is bigger and the dough is a bit different. It's like sweet, but everything inside it's hearty. So like it's like almost like a chicken pot pie kind of in there. But you can get chicken, you can get beef, you can get pork, but there's like potatoes and egg and peas and like this delicious broth in there that's just marinating. That's the best Bolivian dish I can tell you.
That sounds so good. I'm like ready to, I'm ready to eat right now. I can definitely relate though with having like very strict rules in terms of like friends and like what you can do. My parents, or at least my mother, was a lot like that as well. We usually, like, if we wanted to have sleepovers, like usually the kids had to come over to our house. Like we weren't allowed to go over to their house very often
Yeah.
unless like my mother was like really, really good friends with their parents. And then like even just going out to the mall, to the movies, like she always had to know like who we were with, what movie we were going to see, when we were going to get back. And just like all of these things, which I mean, I guess for certain kids, it makes sense to ask all these questions and be super strict because some kids will like try to do whatever they can and like sneak anything under your nose. But like she was just, like very strict. So I can definitely relate with that. And it was definitely like very tough trying to have a social life sometimes and like trying to fit in and have friends because like people would make plans to go do something and I couldn't always participate. So definitely like really tough, especially like when you get to like junior high, high school type of years.
Oh, it was rough in high school being under like that kind of surveillance. I remember one time, this was the only time I snuck out. My friends, my best friends from high school, they invited me. They were like, "We're gonna watch a horror movie. Come over to the house." Like 6 of us there, and I'm like, "Oh, that sounds like so much fun." So I'm like, "Let me ask my mom." This was when my dad was in Virginia, so it was just me, my mom, my brother. And so she said no. And I was like so bummed out. And then my friends were like, "Oh man, that sucks," And I'm like, "Yeah." And then I was like, "Hold on a second. let, let me see if I can swing something." I had orchestrated me sneaking out and then someone driving over there and picking me up because they had lived 10 minutes away. I did it, definitely got caught. I was not smooth with it at all. My mom was already there awake. So it was not a great outcome, but I did have fun watching the scary movies with my friends.
That's too funny. I love it.
Yeah, but it only happened one time, so we live and learn. But what's funny is that they were still strict with me even as like an adult. Like I was living with them, throughout college. So, I was like 2021 with a curfew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then if I wasn't home, man, my mom would blow up my phone, call me, 10 times in a row. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try to have fun. Come home at midnight, way past the curfew. The curfew's like 10, Tisha, like we're real strict.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Yeah. So I had to deal with that. I would say that was probably the main reason why I moved out pretty early because I felt just like I wasn't allowed to kind of do my own thing.
Yeah, I mean that's really, really tough. I imagine that like your parents growing up in these essentially like third world countries probably back then was like pretty tough and they encountered a lot of things. Like how did that impact them raising you and your brother in terms of like values and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, their childhoods were definitely rough. Both of them didn't necessarily have come from money. I remember my mom telling me that she kind of lived on a farm type thing. My dad's family, it was him and his siblings, his mom, and then his dad, who was, not the greatest guy from what I've heard. But yeah, and then they ended up coming to America really young age. I think my dad was here for high school in Southern California and my mom came a bit later. She was about 21. Just from them living like a really humble life, like we tried to do that too and always be grateful for everything that we have and to also work very very hard because that's essentially what they did when they came here and became citizens. They worked very, very hard to have a way better life for their kids than they ever did. So, and they definitely succeeded.
Hearing about your parents and the struggles they had and also just being able to finally make it over here to the States to have a better life and, being told about how hard they worked. And I'm assuming you kind of felt pressured that you had to do the same, like you had to be straight A's, you had to like get this job and like just be kind of perfect in a way.
Oh yeah, no, totally. There was a lot of pressure. I kind of felt like I couldn't complain about anything in my life.
Mhm.
It was very stressful too because, you have a parent that went through so much, and as their kid, like you want to make sure you make them super proud, um, because you're representing them, and they have already been through so much. So yeah, it was always really hardworking. Of course, they wanted like the straight A student. They wanted, us to become doctors and lawyers and everything. So I remember like when I was 10, my dad would be like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would tell him, I want to be like an artist or a chef. And he'd be like, no, I don't think that's what you want. And so, they would always push like the be, these glamorous jobs, make a ton of money, be, established, own your own business and all this stuff. So it was just kind of like you reach for the stars, but at the same time, yeah, those are great things. But, I kind of also want to do something I want to do. At the end of the day, it is my life. So I ended up taking the art route, and I'm sure my parents were happy for me no matter what. But it wasn't what they. I've heard them say a couple times. Oh yeah, she was so great at her debate class. We could have sworn she was going to be a lawyer.
I've had other friends who grew up in kind of in different cultures, but similar values in terms of like they're being pressured to, have certain grades, have a certain job, go to certain college, like live a certain lifestyle, and just a lot of conflicts and arguments about that, especially when the parents have like financial input or investment into you, like whether they're paying for your college or supporting you afterwards. So definitely like a very, very tough thing to deal with, I imagine.
Yeah, you definitely feel that way for sure, like an investment. Yeah, no, that's a really great way to put it. And you don't want to screw the pooch and like ruin it. And then the worst part for me in high school, like in middle school and everything, like I wasn't like an overachiever academically at all. So like that was already off-putting for for the family. My brother was. He was like straight A student. He was honor roll, everything. I totally was the opposite. I was just there. I was just trying to like get through math class. I was just terrible at school. Like I didn't want it to be. I would study very hard, but for some reason, it's just like whenever I had to take a test, everything would just go blank. And then when we would do those reviews, I'd be like, "Come on, like you knew that."
I've always wondered how schools, especially public schools, can make alternatives to like traditional tests, because I think that they make a lot of like accommodations and they find other ways of testing people's knowledge, like if you have a learning disability or a different disability, but they don't really take into account people who have anxiety. And for someone who also struggles with anxiety, it can become very nerve wracking, especially like if you forget one, like if you're taking a test and you forget one answer, it kind of just like destroys you for the rest of the test. Like you're either like still trying to figure out that other answer and just being super anxious and then like starting to second guess like the rest of your answers as well. And then just like test, like only providing one option to quote unquote test someone's knowledge. Like, I just don't think that that's fair, especially in today's society. Like, there have to be other ways that you can test the knowledge just to figure out if someone actually understands the material.
Totally. And it's funny, actually, I talked to my boyfriend quite a bit about this because currently he's in school and he wants to become a history teacher. So,
Mm.
and we talk about like, different anxieties that happen in the classroom. So he knows about my test anxiety, and we talked about it. He let me know, he reassured me that is a very real thing. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
thank God. Like, but yeah, no, it's been very interesting to see like, the way like they teach him to teach others and everything. So
So you and your parents clashed a lot when it came to the culture. Like they had their culture that they grew up with. You were born in the States, so you're essentially an American. Well, I mean, I know you were born in Germany, but you came here when you were a toddler, so you're an American. But then also just moving around all the time, like it was really hard probably to create this like foundation because you didn't really have a true hometown. So when you finally moved to Kansas, like you mentioned, it was like a huge culture shock for you, just being very, very different from California. And I feel like at this point, you kind of had like this tipping point and we're almost kind of fighting with your culture yourself too, because, you know, like you mentioned or shared with me that there were some racism, like bullying, and you also kind of like lost your language in a way. What do you remember about that time in Kansas?
Yeah, so that was definitely my first year. I was in 8th grade. I was coming from California, so I was a lot darker, because we used to be outside, I mean, all the time, every day. I was also very like normal. It was normal for me to hear Spanish or to speak Spanish at the time, because like all my family that we saw lived in California. They all spoke Spanish. It was, that was just the norm. I come to Kansas, and I think the first day of school I had, or at least the first week, I remember my first memory is just being called a wetback, being called a beaner, saying, go swim back to your country. I got where are you from a lot, like where's your family from? Because everyone was curious to just see. I ended up telling them, I was like, I'm Bolivian, Honduran, I was born in Germany, like, the whole thing. And then they'd just be like, oh, you're Mexican. And I'm like, it's terrible that they use Mexican as an insult like that. That's
Yeah.
what was for me the whole time, because that is what they just think of, just Latinos or Latinas everywhere. You're just Mexican. There's nothing else to you. Anything south of the States is just all Mexico to their mind. So it was a kind of slap to my face. Anytime they would talk about Spanish, it was called Mexican. So they'd be like, don't speak Mexican. But yeah, no, it was just a lot of slurs thrown my way, a lot of racist jokes. And at the time, I don't know how to cope with it. So instead, the way I do it is try to use like joking comedy to like defer it away from me. And that's primarily what I did, because it was mostly male students doing it to me, so that was already like terrifying for me. I was like, oh man, these guys are like, they're like twice my size, telling me to swim back to my country, and I'm like, I'm already here. So
Wow.
you hear that from kids, the next thing you think of is like, how are their parents? They're probably teaching them these things. They're probably much worse. Who knows how far they would go, and how justified they think they will be in doing it, because this is their norm, to speak this way. So I try to keep my head down, and then just like, if someone says something to me, just laugh it off and continue going. And that was pretty much my introduction to Kansas people.
Did that make you feel kind of embarrassed to be or like ashamed to be Hispanic at that time?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, it was a bit traumatizing, honestly. There was a point in my life, probably about freshman year of high school, where I was like, you know what? Because it was really that 1 year in middle school where it all happened all at once. And so in freshman year, I was like, I'm not even gonna say anything about where I'm from, where my family's from. I didn't even want to know Spanish. Like I pretty much, I wanted to give up everything right then and there. I was like, I didn't want to have my culture anymore. It was just so much. And so I pretty much forced myself to forget everything. That's when I stayed inside pretty much the whole summer. So a lot of my bloodline's from Spain, so we're already light skinned. So when I stayed inside, my tan went away. Yeah, no, it was a lot. And then in middle school, I think it was my freshman year. So that year I came back, I was like, I'm not going to let this kind of stop me. We're just going to keep going. I'm just going to recreate myself. Basically, they're not going to be able to touch me. And it was that year when I had got beaten up, like at a football game. I was watching my brother play football I think it was like every Friday. And I had a lot of friends in the band. So I used to go sit in the band section. And then when it was halftime, they would have to go do their band thing. And then they would come back, we would hang out. So it was halftime. They went to go do their band thing. I was like, I'm gonna go grab a snack from the concession stands. And they had like this alleyway that the only students went through. It wasn't like not many people went through. So as I was saying, I was going through the alleyway. I was gonna grab a snack while my friends were playing out for halftime. Next thing I know, I think someone had jumped on my back. Somehow they took me down. I was on the floor very quickly. And I just hear, like, go back to your country, they're kicking me. It was really like a blur. I remember then they left. I knew one of the voices for sure. And so I had gotten back up. I was like, had a huge amount of adrenaline. Like I couldn't really feel anything. And I remember just going back, waiting for my friends to come back because they were almost done. They had found me and they were like, what the heck happened? And I kind of told them, I was like, I don't know, but they said this. I got, I got hit here. I'm crying. My face is all puffy. And so we go to try to find the police officer. There's usually a police that goes to the school. And he's usually there at the games. So we go look for him and we find him. We tell him what happened. Hey, this kid, I'm pretty sure it's this kid that hit me. This is what happened. Like, these are the hit marks. He didn't really do anything. He did find the kid. The kid was just kind of like, I don't know what happened. I guess he was like, well, there's not much I can do type of situation. So he just like, he didn't do anything. He didn't even contact my parents. Like that's how much care went into this. So yeah, that was pretty much the end of that night. I had told my brother the next morning because he was out in the field playing and I didn't want to bother him. But I just remember not being helped by the police officer at all. And I'm not sure why. My brother was obviously very upset. So from that day on, he made sure to keep like a very, very close watch the rest of the year on me. There was an occasion the sophomore year, the next year after this incident, I was in a chemistry class and I sat down. The next person I see walk through the door is the person that had hit me during that football game. And I was like petrified when I saw him, and he had sat right next to me. And I like did not know what to do. I didn't end up telling my chemistry teacher until about, I think, like 3 months into chemistry. And I was like, I can't do this thing. Like, I'm way too anxious. Like, I can't do it anymore. So I go to her and I'm like, hey, I'm letting you know, like, this happened last year. This is the dude that did it. And I'm sitting right next to him. So I need to move my chair. So she moved my chair, but then didn't do anything else after that. Like, didn't question it, didn't talk to him, didn't like tell the principal. So like this incident just kind of went unheard. And that's all I remember from that. But I just remember it being racially charged at the time because of what they were saying when they were pretty much beating me up. But yeah, no, it just felt like no one cared.
I'm really glad you had your brother, like an older sibling, there to kind of look after you after that event. But I'm really sorry that even had to happen in the first place.
Yeah, it was really rough. And like, it was definitely nice having my brother. My brother's, his name is Kevin. We shared the same lunch. And after that, like someone had like thrown a carrot during our lunch period. I'm not sure if it was towards me, but it ended up hitting my head. And that was the part that set Kevin off. So like literally after lunch, he like grabbed him, like put him against the lockers. He was just like, don't you ever touch my sister again, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, aw. So he was like really like, he got really protective of me. Like, especially after the incident where like he was more upset that I didn't tell him right away. And I was there like, I didn't want to bother you. Like, you're in your game, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, no, after that, he was very like, very, very close. We got very close together.
So after Kansas, you guys moved to Virginia and you're a senior in high school. And this is kind of a time where you feel like you actually want to reclaim your culture and you join a Bolivian dance group to try to do that. Like, what do you remember about that experience and kind of like what triggered you and like that desire to really get back to your cultural roots?
Yeah, well, so I remember after we moved away from Kansas and I came to Virginia, I realized that not everything is like Kansas, and there's like so much more diversity here, at the DMV, and it was just completely different. No one cared about, you speaking a different language or you coming from where you're from. Everyone is so welcoming that they're just like, yeah, just like tell us a little more about it. It was totally opposite from what I was used to. And at that time, I was like, well, now I feel almost like whitewashed because, I kind of gave up all that stuff so I could fit in there. And now I'm over here where people actually care about your culture. So it was kind of like eye-opening for me where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is important. Like I do need to know about this stuff and know about, where my family comes from and the countries and everything. I remember when we were in California, I had a lot of older cousins that were doing the same Bolivian dance group. It's called Caporales. And my other cousin came to visit us in Virginia, and she wanted to try out for the group, and she told me to come, and I was like, okay, yeah, like let's do it. That sounds like fun. And I ended up falling in love with it. It was like so much fun. It was very empowering. I got to be around people that were also from Bolivia. Everyone spoke Spanish and English, so I got to really get the language back again, and just be more comfortable speaking it and everything, which was really nice. And then we did competitions and parades and things, so it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I still have like my dancing outfits. They definitely don't fit anymore, but I still have them as like a really great memory, and where I got to learn something new. But yeah, no, it was awesome. I loved it.
Hi, my wonderful goat friends. Firstly, thank you so much for your support and listening. If you're enjoying this conversation and other episodes of the podcast, I'd like to ask you to please give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you are listening on right now. And if you're so inclined, we'd love to hear your feedback in a full review. Also, might be a great idea to hit subscribe on that platform you're listening to right now so you can get notified of new episodes as they are released. Thank you so much again for being one of our loyal goat listeners.
You were raised Mormon for the majority of your childhood. Was that something that your parents each brought from their home countries, or how did they actually become Mormon?
Yeah, so I was actually trying to figure this out too, because I know it comes from my mom's side, because her siblings are also Mormon, or at least definitely her brother is. So I knew it came from my mom's side because originally we were Catholics. From my dad's side, I know I was baptized Catholic, and then I was baptized Mormon later on when I was about 8. But from what I kind of deducted was because Mormons will send out missionaries to different countries, and they'll kind of like preach the religion there and like set up actual churches and everything. So I think that's how it happened. I think that's why my mom's side is Mormon, probably through missionaries going over there and kind of preaching the Mormon word.
Being raised Mormon, I mean, the Mormon religion, it was a little bit of, well, maybe a big struggle for you, some of the teachings and philosophies that they had. What do you remember most about things that you struggled with, either just grasping or being able to really identify with as it came to like values and things like that?
Sure. Well, so I know when I was like a kid, or like child, I remember thinking, man, this is really strict. Like, I remember there's like a lot of rules that they kind of set, and not necessarily would you find these in like a Christian church. Like, I'm pretty sure they're specifically for the Mormon church. It was like down to appearance. It was down to what you consume in your body and through your ears. So it was like dress wear. You weren't allowed to expose anything above the knee, anything above the like the shoulders. So it was very modest. There's kind of like a purity culture that's kind of just shoved down your throat at a very young age. So You know, I was definitely taught to dress modest. Anything else, I mean, you're considered essentially a bad person. So
Wow.
no tattoos, or else you're really looked down upon. If you wear, I mean, they're probably judging people with like colored hair that's unnatural colored. I remember that just, it was very judgy about how you looked. I remember that from a very young age. Secondly, you weren't allowed to consume certain things. So like caffeine, like coffee, you weren't allowed to consume it. I don't necessarily know why to this day. I just know it was one of the rules. You weren't allowed to do anything on Sunday except essentially worship God. You weren't allowed to spend money that day. You pretty much had to go to church and then go back home and then just like continue the worship of God. I'm pretty sure music wise, you had to listen to music that was very preachy, very gospel. I think Christian rock was like okay, but most of the music that I listened to growing up, rap music or like heavy metal music, like I'm pretty sure that would have been scrutinized too if someone found out. But I just remember, yeah, being very judged. I had to uphold this appearance from a very early age. I just remember that as a kid, like, man, like I feel like I have to live to these standards type of thing. Then when I got older, as more probably teenish, I started noticing that no one that went to that church, at least in our hour, it was separated. There was a morning service, and then there was like a later in the morning service. The one that we went to, it was all white people. Like I just remember that when I was reminiscing about my Mormon times, I was like, I don't remember seeing one person of color. Now we were very light skinned, so we pass. So I just remember that and thinking how weird it was that the first service was all Hispanic people separated from the white people.
Oh,
I always
wow.
thought that was very weird. Yeah, to this day, like I said, I could not tell you why they do it other than, they might be racist. But I just remember that being very weird to me. I know that they 100%, it was very like if you're gay or even think about it, I mean, you're completely scrutinized for sure, and they're probably going to tell you something's wrong with you, or for you to think about it a little more, to pray to God to it. There's a lot of shame, I would say, that in this church that they try to put on you. They just tell you like, oh, just pray to God and like you'll be fixed, no worries. But yeah, I started questioning things because you weren't allowed to talk about sex or sexuality, really anything. There'd be times where I'm like, why do we have to dress like this? And they'd be like, oh, well, because that's what God intended. Like that's how God likes it. But I'm like, well, that doesn't really answer my question though. So
Yeah.
I would just start questioning things and then I would never get an answer. And so, when I became about 14, 15, I was just kind of fed up with it. I'm like, I feel like I'm blindly following something. It feels weird. I feel shame anytime I do something type of thing. I mean, you weren't even allowed to curse. Like it was just felt very strict, and I felt very ashamed of myself and I didn't want to feel that way. And so when I was 15, I ended up taking a religions class because I kind of wanted to explore and see what other people believe. And so it was a really cool class. We actually got to take field trips to all the different churches. So we went to a mosque, we went to a Catholic church, we went to a synagogue, we went to a Christian church, and I think that was it. And then we talked a bit about Buddhism. But I just remember learning about, all these different things, all these different religious cultures. And I was there kind of like, everyone kind of does it their own way. That doesn't necessarily mean one way is true. And so I just started becoming a bit more agnostic, I would say, around that age, where I was like, it's cool that everyone else believes, in their own religion. I'm sure it brings comfort to most people. It's not for me. It's kind of like how I decided it. It was fun learning about everything else though, knowing that there's more than just like the Mormon church out there. So that's pretty much how I came to the conclusion to being agnostic. I just like did a lot more research and kind of went on my own spiritual journey, and then just kind of realized it's not really a comfort that I need.
Unfortunately, I kind of got to this place myself just because of a lot of the very questionable things I saw happening within the religion called Christianity that I grew up with. And
Mhm.
a lot of things like regarding women, especially like holding men much higher, and
Oh yeah.
people in leadership telling women that even if their husbands did something completely atrocious that they had to stay with them.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
as someone I've just always been very, very independent. And I was like, there's no way if I got married and my husband did something like that to me that I would stay with them. So I couldn't understand how like this person, God, Jesus, whatever you want to call him or her, it could be a her too. I don't know why it has to be a him all the time. But anyway, like how they could allow this or basically not condone this type of behavior, and it just like made me very, very conflicted. So yeah, and then just other things too, like I don't really want this conversation, I feel like I could go on for hours just about all
Yeah.
the things that are so wrong with religions, but even just thinking about the celebrity preachers or whatever you want to call them, like all these people with millions of dollars, super mansions, like 10 cars.
Oh, you're talking like Joel Osteen type people?
Exactly. I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
how is this, how, like, based on your religion, like not yours but just in general, like their religion, how is it okay for you to have these millions of dollars, like, and like all these cars, a super nice house, but how are the communities around you suffering? Like, isn't that supposed to be like what you do, that you serve, you become a servant and you dedicate your time to like making the lives of those people around you better? Like, I don't understand it at all.
I remember growing up in the church, basically being told like my role as a woman, basically just to produce children. Like, and that was your purpose. You have no other purpose except that. And so I remember seeing a lot of families with like 6+ kids. That was like the norm. And then like the wife would have to stay at home and like have no career while the man kind of like takes a hold of it. So I remember that being like kind of like the baseline of like what life is supposed to look like, which is totally untrue. I mean, it's very oppressive.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, being groomed to basically say you're going to be, you're going to learn to cook, you're going to learn to clean, you're going to learn to look your best for your husband. And like,
Yeah.
that's the only reason why you're here, is to be there for a man. Like,
Dedicate your
that's,
life to your man and your kids, and that's it. Like you're just the middleman at this point.
gosh, I can't imagine. I mean, I don't want to pass any judgment at all, but I can't imagine being a mother and having a daughter and telling her or supporting those type of values, to basically say
Right.
like, yeah, that's hard. I mean, how was that for you? I mean, when did you start being told these things? How old were you?
I remember, learning how to cook and clean at a very young age. I know like my mom would always make sure appearances were like put first. Like I was not allowed to leave the house unless I was like made up and done kind of thing. So, growing up that way, it put a little bit of self-consciousness in my life because it was more so like, okay, if I don't look this way, like no one's gonna want me type of thing later on in life. If I don't do these things, then no one's gonna want me either. It was a lot of pressure, honestly. Like it just felt like a lot of pressure to be a woman. So, and I'm like very laid back. I'm chill. Um, I don't necessarily want to get, all done up and ready every day. So, and that was like, it brought shame again to me. And like that I didn't want to do, I didn't want to wear high heels every day, or I didn't want to put my, do my hair every day or do my makeup every day. Um, and so it was just, yeah, I just remember it being a lot of pressure, just like to be this woman that I guess not sure if society was trying to make me to be or if my parents were trying to make me to be. It took a while to outgrow that. And it's something that I took into a lot of relationships too. Like just like I have to be this certain person. I was never really myself in a lot of them. I have to be this perfect like housewife material to make this work, essentially, which is like totally not the right way to go about any relationship.
That's really, really tough. I was actually, so I don't know if you've ever seen the show, The Marvelous Miss Maisel. I started watching it earlier this week, actually, and it's so sad because, like, you know, one of well, multiple scenes within the series of the show, you see the wives get up at like 4 in the morning while their husbands are still sleeping to go do their makeup, like wash their face, do their makeup, curl their hair, and then like basically get themselves pretty to go back to bed so that when their husbands wake up, they look perfect.
That's wild.
It's so wild. And like this is
Yeah.
something that people were doing in the 50s and 60s. Like I just started watching it and like I really want to see if my grandma remembers having to do that, or not having to do it, but feeling like she had to do that back in the 50s, 60s. I was just like, no effing way. Like, so no way am I getting up at 4 a.m. to do my hair. I don't even wear makeup, honestly. To do my hair, to like get dressed. No fucking way. No, not for anyone.
I can't say I haven't done that. Not 4 a.m., but
Yeah.
like before they wake up and like make sure I look presentable. I can't say I haven't done that. And that was like, yeah, like thinking about it now, like that's so sad. Like
You actually got married pretty young. You were about like what, 20 or 21-ish when you got married?
I was about 21, yeah.
You know, do you think do you think you were pressured to get married so young? I mean, because 21 is like very, very young. Thinking about it, I couldn't imagine getting married at 21. And if you did get married, just having like a lot of challenges, especially because I feel like at 21, you're still trying to like become your own person. So like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I had no idea who Jasmine was at that time. Literally, many more years after that to figure out who I was as a person. I definitely felt pressure. You know, my parents got married pretty young. I feel like it was very normal for people to get married pretty young and, you know, stay together for the rest of their lives. So I felt that pressure. You know, my mom begging me to have grandchildren to this day.
I know how that is.
Yeah. So it was just it was someone that was there. And it was like, you know, within that mindset where, okay, I just need someone that essentially wants me. You know what I mean? Like someone that's gonna be there. There was no other baseline other than that. So the bar, I mean, my bar back then was so low. Tisha, was very sad. You know, I just took anyone. It didn't have to be anyone meaningful. It was just like I needed to feel wanted as a woman. Like it was so, you know, bare boned. So I got married, figured out that that's totally not what a relationship needs to grow. You actually need to find a person that is right for you. So, you know, coming with those challenges and still having that mindset like, okay, well, I need to do, you know, XYZ to be this perfect housewife. It was a lot of pressure. And it was just like it wasn't a real kind of relationship, to where definitely not a real marriage in my opinion. But yeah, no, it was so stressful. I just remember waking up with anxiety like every morning. It was terrible. Now I'm not gonna say the person that I married, like I didn't, you know, like him or anything, but it wasn't like that deep love that I feel like you should feel with your partner, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But like just to have that pressure on you. And then I know that you were also kind of dealing with some other challenges on top of your anxiety throughout the marriage. Like I know there were some conflicts with your mother-in-law, and then you were moving forward pretty quickly in your career and doing really, really well. And I assume that, you know, for the person you were married to at the time, it was probably challenging for them and probably caused some conflicts as well.
Oh yeah, because they wanted, you know, they wanted that housewife. They wanted the
Yeah.
control. So yeah, I started progressing in my career pretty fast. I was doing very well for myself and learning a lot of things. I ended up making more money than him at some point of our relationship. And that was something that just really hit him hard, in his confidence. So, which was like the total opposite of what I needed at the time. I was getting more responsibilities and working, later nights, and I wasn't getting that support anymore from that person. And so it just got harder. I would come home and then I would have a whole nother other things to do on top of, coming home already from a stressful day. So it was really tough. And especially at the time because he had worked from home. But for some reason, in his mind, he was a man. So he didn't have to do, womanly responsibilities. So that was really tough on me. I didn't have that support system for years, and it just got harder and harder on me. So yeah, I wouldn't say he didn't like the fact that I made money, but he definitely didn't like that I made more. He ended up spending a lot of my own money in the end. So it wasn't even like because he wanted like that control financially too. He just wanted control over everything essentially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it was really bad. It was professionally controlling for me and my finances. But then like just friends in general, like because he was already losing that self-confidence, um like it was very controlling in who I was talking to, in who I would, hang out with too. Anytime I brought up my best friends, like I could tell there was animosity with it. My best friends from high school in West Springfield, they're both male. So there was just, certain things, little passive aggressive cues here and there. It was rough, but it was weird because at the time, he was pressuring me to marry him. His friends around him were pressuring me to marry him. My family was kind of like, you're already getting old, give us grandchildren,
21, you're
so
getting old.
you're I'm
Sorry.
already now I'm 28. Imagine what they think now. But it was just a lot of pressure at the time, and I didn't know what I was doing. If I'm being honest with myself, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I could make it work, and wow, I bit off way more than I could chew, and I was not ready for it whatsoever. Barely knew myself at the time, and it was so many factors that it was gonna fail no matter what. But yeah, I just regret making that decision because I feel like I deserve so much more than I was allowing myself to have. Man, it honestly could have just been a very different path if I had known a little better. But hey, we live and learn. And throughout the whole thing, going through the divorce alone, essentially, that was a whole ordeal too. So I ended up having to go to therapy after that. It was a little before COVID, like
Yeah.
towards the end, I would say was the lockdown type situation. So I had made the decision to leave him. My parents were literally on the way. This is the day that happened. They were on the way from Virginia to San Antonio. They're moving to San Antonio to be closer to me. And I'm in Austin. I make the decision, it's time. Um, and he ends up abandoning the house and me. So it's just me in there. And he had some friends that had moved from Virginia to Texas in the same town, so he went to go to them. And it was just me alone there. My parents had came. I remember my dad, he told me, he was like, I had never seen you like that before. Like that was the first time he really saw me just like totally broken. And it was really tough. They ended up having, they had to go close on their house. They were rolling with me for one night. And then the rest of the time, I had to separate everything by myself. I had to do everything by myself. He wasn't there to help. I felt very alone. It was just like, it was a really rough time. I had to find the real estate agent because I had to put the house up for sale. I had to figure out how to do the whole divorce process by myself. I had to figure out, how am I even going to fund it? It was a lot, but, ended up getting through it. Unfortunately, then COVID hit in the middle of it. So while I'm trying to get, him to sign these papers, there's a ton of papers he needs to sign. And then the house, there was an offer pre-COVID and he wanted more. So he ended up turning it down. And it was like a really good offer. COVID came, and let me tell you, selling a house during a pandemic, would not recommend. It's almost impossible. We had to wait an extra like 5 months before it even sold. So I wasn't even living at the house. I had gotten everything out. I was with my parents and still paying for a mortgage. It was so unfortunate. And then in the middle of COVID too, I had lost my job. I had gotten laid off in the middle of all this, in the middle of the COVID, the divorce. Then I had gotten laid off, and it was just like, man, like life is really kicking my ass right now. The house ended up selling. We ended up having to lose money because, at that point it was just like, just get it out of our hands. We ended up selling the house. I think a month later, I had gotten a job pretty shortly after, and things were starting to turn up. It was like, very like weights were lifted off my shoulder.
Now being, having this title of divorcee, and that must have been like really, really hard for you. I mean, I could imagine that I would feel like kind of ashamed that I got married and then got divorced so quickly. But you mentioned that you sought therapy, and that was really able to kind of help you work through this divorce, especially because you didn't really have too many people other than your parents to really like turn to emotionally.
Yeah, and honestly, like I couldn't even turn to them because it was kind of like shame for them too. You know?
Mm.
It was very like, how could you let this happen? Like this was your decision, type of a deal. And so, again, like I felt very alone in this, and I ended up going to therapy originally for that, but it ended up opening, a ton of facets in my life that it was eye-opening for me. Yeah, I mean, I went in there saying like, I just feel like I messed up. I messed up life. Like this is the death sentence. And I remember the one thing she told me was just like, well, hey, like you're not the first person to go through this, There's a ton of divorces that happen, and it wasn't necessarily, anyone's fault. You just weren't meant for each other. Like it was not going to work out. You two just ended up picking each other for the wrong reasons, and it wasn't strong enough to uphold. But she said like, it's okay, like that's fine. This is honest. It's not the worst thing that could happen to you regarding, a relationship ending badly. It could have been much worse. Could have been like physically abusive on top of that, or something else could have happened. But just to hear someone say like, it's okay, all you have to do is just kind of like move on from it, but without the shame. Like you don't have to be ashamed that you're divorced.
Like when you were younger, not that you're not still young, when you were younger, you said like you would kind of overlook some of these like red flags, and you almost had like these rosy glasses, if you will. How do you think the therapy really helped you work through that and learn that like, yeah, like these are red flags for a reason and you need to pay attention to them?
Yeah, that's definitely where I got familiar with the term, wearing rose glasses, rose colored glasses, which I 100% did throughout my whole life with anything. I
Yeah.
learned that I was a people pleaser, to the heart. So I would bend over backwards for nothing in return most of the time, or for just like for anything. I mean, it was I would put my like the stress on myself for others, just to make sure they were happy. And then I learned, like, oh, I can't make everyone happy. So that's what I ended up learning later on in life. But for relationship wise, having rose colored glasses on, it's very dangerous in my opinion. Yeah, there were a ton of times where obviously I would go through things, today knowing that they're wrong. Back then, going through it just because I wanted to feel that likeness. I wanted to feel that affection. I wanted to know like, well, okay, you still like me though, right? Like it was almost like pick me-ish, which is terrible. So I had to learn through that. Like, that's just a character flaw in myself that I have to like keep reminding myself, like, it's okay. Like, you can say no. Like, you don't have to feel bad about it. But it took many years to learn that. And so, yeah, that's definitely what I learned in therapy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing because I think that a lot of people can find that very helpful. Surprisingly, probably people much, much older than both you and I, because I think that that's having like rose-colored glasses is something that a lot of people struggle with, the people pleasing part. A lot of people struggle with. Even my husband just finally kind of realized that. We actually started reading this book called Positive Intelligence, and there's like this new kind of quotient similar to EQ or IQ called PQ, and it really helps you identify like the saboteurs in your life that really hold you back as an adult. As a child, they were kind of necessary to help you survive, but now as an adult, they're more of a hindrance. And so people pleaser is one of those saboteurs that he specifically struggles with. So I'm just really, really glad that you did seek therapy, and because I know that there's a lot of stigma around therapy even today. And so I'm really glad that you kind of took that step for yourself and that it was so helpful for you to help you grow.
Yeah, no, there is a ton of stigma with therapy culturally too. I remember even talking to my dad about therapy, just like not even going to it, just in general. And he was very like, yeah, no, you can't do that because once you go to therapy, like you're labeled as crazy, basically. Like something is wrong with you at that point. And so I just remember, thinking about therapy in that way for a long time, like, oh no, like therapy, like you're gonna be, labeled at that point. But it's so untrue. It's honestly one of the healthiest things you could do for yourself and for the people around you. And I just think it's a responsible thing for people to go through. I don't think people should be afraid of therapy. I personally advocate for people to go to it, even if you don't even think you need it. Like, it's surprising how much actually opens when you open up yourself. Um, so yeah, no, I loved it. It was a great experience. I always tell people therapy is probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, I'm glad it was so positive for you, and I definitely could not agree more. Even for those of us who have pretty, pretty healthy, happy lives now. I had a lot of stuff that I had to go through as a child, and I actually keep telling myself that I'm going to talk to someone, um, but I have not done that yet. I actually just downloaded. There's this app that my work actually gives us called Ginger Support. And through there, you can connect to like coaches, like mental health coaches and also therapists. So I finally downloaded it, and I think I'm finally going to just reach out to someone because I think even now, like I feel okay, but I know that there's a lot of stuff from my childhood and my younger years that are probably still affecting me a little bit, or at least it would still be good for me to try to like, put those things to bed in a way.
Definitely. I found something that helps me specifically. I searched for a woman, and then I searched for a woman that was Latina because I felt like it would be more relatable for me and her to talk. And boy, I was right because I learned a lot of things culturally that I went through as a kid and as an adult to where I thought it was normal. I thought everyone had gone through it, and it wasn't true. It was just, something that most Hispanic households go through. A lot of like the appearance upholding, um, even though I had thought that that was from the Mormon church, a lot of it was influenced too by culture. So yeah, there was just a lot of things other than the divorce too that really, I mean, it helped me open my eyes from my childhood that kind of helped me realize why I am the way I am today, how I can improve upon it, because there was a lot of just things that I had went through that caused a lot of like self-confidence issues within myself, and I had to learn like, no, like you're really awesome, like you don't have to listen to those things, like those aren't like set in stone rules. You don't have to necessarily upkeep yourself in this perfect image all the time, or even ever. Like, you don't have to be someone that you're not. And that was eye-opening to me.
Going back to your childhood, though, for a little bit, you, starting at the age of 12, had a very long, painful journey dealing with two hormonal chronic conditions, one of which being endometriosis. What what was that like for you, and kind of what were the first telling signs that you had such a serious condition?
Yeah, so that was yeah, big thing that happened in my life. It's still prevalent today. I started so okay, so I had when I was 12, that's when kind of my body started changing. I had got my first period. Um about 13, I started realizing how painful my periods were, but they were extreme. So I would bleed a lot. I would go through a whole box of pads for one period. And then never failed. I would always have to bring a second pair of pants to school every day for that whole week. It was just so much. And I thought it was totally normal. I was like, yeah, everyone has, this heavy of a flow. There would be days where I'm literally like fetal position, I can't move for like maybe 1-2 days. So but I thought everyone had gone through this. Apparently, that is not the case. Apparently, most what's considered a normal period isn't. It's painful, but it's not supposed to be like debilitating. So I had to learn that later on in life. But at the time, I was like, okay, this is totally normal. I just have to get used to it, type of a thing. Then I started experiencing different um, things like cystic acne, but like a lot of it. And I'm not sure if you've had a cystic acne before. It hurts very bad and it's very hard almost. But yeah, I constantly had that. And then I started noticing my hair falling out. Um, so when I would take a shower, I would run my hand through my hair, put the shampoo in. And when I took my hand out, I mean, there'd be clumps of just hair in my hand. And that was every day. So it was a bit traumatizing because there was no way for me to hide that part. Everyone has acne, so I wasn't too like worried about that. The hair thing, I couldn't like put a hat on or a bandana on because we were in school. So that part, I don't even remember like wanting to look at pictures of me at that time. I don't even know if I have any anymore. I think I got rid of them. So there was that. There was a weight gain too, very prevalent. I was definitely chunkier for sure in Kansas when the symptoms were very high. Apparently I learned on later in life that PCOS and endometriosis can both give you depression and anxiety just as a symptom. So I was already stressed out with all the other factors happening around me at that time. And then on top of that, it's just like bound to happen anyway. So it was just a lot of that. I ended up going to a doctor and telling him like, hey, these are all the things that are happening. I don't think it's normal. And I think I was either 13 or 14 at the time. And he was like, well, you're a growing young lady, so your body is going to change. So it's probably just like your period or something. So that was the explanation for a long time until I was about 16. I started feeling this awful pain randomly. It was much worse than like a period cramp. It was like it would take me down immediately. I would fall to the floor. And I had no idea what it was. I went to the hospital a couple times. They would do x-ray and they couldn't find anything. By the third time I went to the hospital, they had told me, they actually told my parents that I was lying. There's nothing there. We don't know what she's feeling. Here's some pain medicine again, and just send me home. So we had seen an endocrinologist. She had told me I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, meaning I get cysts on my ovaries. And then she just would give me experimental drugs, essentially, to try to combat the symptoms. So that's how they really try to find it. They would just do symptom to symptom, different pills for everything. So I was forced to get on birth control. And then I was forced to get on another medicine called spironolactone, which is a blood pressure medication, but my blood pressure is completely normal. So there was that. Then I had to get on another pill called metformin, which was supposed to help with the insulin resistance. At some point later on, I ended up taking insulin. but I'm not diabetic. I've never been diabetic. So there was just a lot of different things that they were throwing at me that I would have to take all throughout high school. And it would make me feel even worse at times. So at some point, I ended up just kind of dropping a few of them. I think after the insulin, because I'm already terrified of needles. At least at the time I was. I'm a lot better about it now, especially after getting tattoos. But at the time I was terrified. I remember the first time I had to stick myself, I had a panic attack for like 20 minutes. And it's a baby needle. Like it literally feels like nothing. But I had to stick it in my stomach. And it was just like, the whole thing was terrible. I just felt sick. And I ended up seeing other doctors because a lot of the times the doctors would tell me, oh, you just get on like a Mediterranean diet and lose some weight and then all your problems will be solved. I ended up losing a lot of weight when I moved to Virginia. And my problems did not get solved. So I just kept living life with all these pills and everything throughout senior year. And then through when college had hit, I started noticing even more just like, the pain during the periods. My period started becoming completely erratical. Like there would be times when I would have it for 2 months straight, and there'd be times when it would be gone for 6 months. And it was just totally out of sync. And I never knew what it was going to do. And then there was one year. So when I was about 23, I think is when I had my surgery, 24. It was a year, I just say I lost my life that year because I don't even remember most of it. I was in agonizing pain that whole year. I couldn't think straight at all. And it was just constant stress and constant depression. And I could barely walk, 10 steps without feeling winded or without feeling my sciatica pain. And I had to sit down for it to go away just so I could walk another 10 steps. Like it was so humiliating at the time because I just felt so weak. And it was a lot of back pain. It was a lot of just physical pain at this time. And I was exhausted. I mean, and then I was so depressed I didn't want to leave the bed. It was terrible. So I sought out some help because I was like, there's no way I can live like this another year. Absolutely not. There was this one OBGYN that I saw, and I was telling her about my issues. And she told me that, she could prescribe me pain medicine for the rest of my life if I wanted to. She was going to give me Percocets just for life. That was her solution. Wow. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. The pain was so heavy that I had to take a Percocet for it to go away. So, and I already knew what it was like to do that, to just have a Percocet. And I didn't like the feeling of being on one. Like it made my head super fuzzy and cloudy. I couldn't think straight already, and that just made it worse. So I was like, there's no way you're just going to give me Percocets for the rest. Like I need an actual solution. So I ended up having to switch again until I found someone that was willing to help. And finally there was a endocrinologist, OBGYN surgeon. He told me to come in, and he had literally put pressure on my lower stomach because it gets so inflamed. It's called endobelly. It gets inflamed so much because of the endometriosis growing. There's a lot of bloating there that when he pushed down, I mean, I screamed. Like it hurt so bad. It was such a sensitive, traumatized area. So he said, we're going to get you into surgery next week. Get an MRI this week, and then let's come up with a game plan. And so I was like, okay. So I get my first MRI, and I'm terrified of them now because it's like a small tunnel they put you in. And I didn't realize I was claustrophobic until then. And so I got through it though. He was able to see everything. And so he told me that an X-ray or a scan, a belly scan wouldn't have been able to see it. Like you need an MRI. And so he told me that the cyst pain I was feeling when I was like 15, I had cysts on top of my uterus, and it kept bursting over and over again. And so it was like a complex cyst is what he called it, because after it exploded, it would regrow on itself. And like he could see all like the structural integrity in it. Like it was a very large cyst. Um, and then he said, on top of that, this is when I learned I had endometriosis. He said, I also have endometriosis. And it had grown so large that it was about to touch the lining of my stomach. It had grabbed both of my ovaries and essentially created this angry ball. It was no longer in like that nice T shape. It was just a big circle of wrath and pain. And so he was like, yeah, you need to get surgery. Like, there's no way you can live like this. Once it starts getting tall enough, it'll like start grabbing at your organs. Like you have to get it burnt off every 5 to 10 years, essentially, is what I learned. So I was just living life with this and like combating it with useless pills at this point. Like there was nothing that the pills I was taking could do to combat the endometriosis. So yeah, it was so eye-opening. Like I think I saw 10 doctors total trying to figure out what was going on. And this was over a span of like 10 years. So it was a big health journey for me. We ended up doing the surgery, and it's like this robot going in with lasers and lasering it all off. They ended up having to take, I think, like half of one of my ovaries because it was just like filled with cysts, and it was already gone due to the endometriosis. And so we ended up doing that. But man, I remember when I woke up from that surgery, like a brand new woman. Like it was so crazy. I didn't feel any of the pain I was feeling. And he even told me, he was like, you're going to feel totally different right now, but you still need to actually recover. Like you just went through a massive surgery, even though you feel amazing. And I was like, wow, like this is incredible. Like I could hear my own thoughts again. And I was like, wow, like this is crazy. I can make sound decisions. So yeah, it was an amazing time for me after that surgery because I could finally just like do things again. Like after I had recovered, I could walk normally again and I wouldn't feel as tired. I wasn't as extremely bloated anymore. My anxiety had definitely lessened because at some point, I was having panic attacks like every day, essentially, over I don't even know what. So it was just like a whole new lease on life for sure, is what it felt like.
I am so glad you moved to Virginia and found that doctor, but oh man, it sounds like such a terrible experience. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And for them to take 10, 12 years just to figure out what was going on with you, like we're not talking about 1920s, 30s. Like we had the technology for them to find the issue, but it seems like there were just no doctors, especially in Kansas, that cared enough or had the knowledge to like really deep dive and figure out what the real issue was.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just Kansas doctors, it was specifically military doctors because at the time I was, under
Oh,
military care as well. And a lot of the doctors I would see are male, and you wouldn't necessarily get a choice to see a female. Um, and so, I remember getting like an internal ultrasound at a very young age by a male doctor. Like that was a little
that's
traumatizing for me. I think I was like 13 and like, it was yeah, and then he couldn't find anything. There was a lot of that. It was a lot of we can't find anything because they're just doing ultrasounds, just like the belly scan. And apparently from what I heard from the surgeon that, that took care of me, like I needed to get an MRI. Someone had to tell me to get an MRI. Which I guess no one had thought of or cared for. But yeah, no, the whole time I just felt like no one cared type of a thing. A lot of the answers I would get is you just need to lose weight. And they just wouldn't like take the pain to heart because I mean it was very heavy pain and I just felt like no one really heard me.
that's really, really tough. Today though, are you completely pain free?
Yeah, so I have a totally different lifestyle today. I do a lot of weightlifting. Me and my boyfriend do pretty much daily. Um, And we also have a pretty good like eating habit pattern. Not to say we don't enjoy, we love food, so we eat a lot. But like, life is a lot different, for sure. I still have to monitor my endometriosis pain. So a lot of it is what you eat. But there will be certain foods that'll give you indications that you can't eat them anymore. So I had to give up meat, red meat, probably right after the surgery, about like 5 years ago. I noticed that anytime I ate it, I would get that very specific endometriosis pain that I was feeling, at my worst. Coffee, I can't drink coffee anymore. A lot of like heavy tomato based things I can't eat too much of, but I do still enjoy pizza. I could never give that up.
No
But like
way.
but there are like, just certain foods that I have to listen to my body and be very cautious of what I put in, because if I do eat like a steak, if I have more than a bite sometimes, I'll get really sick. I'll have that pain. I'll start throwing up. It's like almost my body just rejects it now. So, that's what I tell people when they're like, do you have any allergies? I'm like, just don't, for the love of God, don't give me beef. Because I've had instances where I accidentally eat it and then I'm stuck in that scenario where I'm just like really sick and I'm out for like a day or two.
Well, I'm sorry you can't have any steaks, but I'm so glad you are much better now than you were.
Totally. I think about meat like so often, Tisha. I grew up on it. Like we used to eat steak all the time, and now like and burgers, and like I can't have anything of the sort. But it was funny because my boyfriend and I, we went to a resort recently, and we went to a steakhouse. I was eating a pork chop. It was really good, and he had like this this absurd amount. Like the cost of the steak was insane. I was like, if I'm gonna chance it, it's gonna be on this steak. I was like, let me have your expensive steak. Let me have a piece of it. So he gave me like a sliver because he knows. And I tried it and I was like, oh my God, like, is this what beef like tastes like? It was like so crazy. I almost cried. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Thankfully, nothing happened to me that day. Like, I think I was just like a little bloated, but like nothing extreme happened.
Good.
But I was like, man, like this is so great. Like I just forgot like just like the taste of it. But yeah.
Hey Goat fans, I can't believe it, but we are already starting to prep for season 2. So, if you're interested in being a guest on Not Your Average Goat and are ready to share your story with the world, please reach out. You can submit a request at notyouraveragegoat.org/contact.
I bring everyone on this show because in some way or another, their journey has inspired me. And so I always love to know who or what in your life has been your biggest inspiration and why.
With my creativity, design life, and everything, I give major props to my uncle. He was someone that inspired me to become a designer. He was designing in New York City. He was doing like big fashion magazines. I think at the time he was working with Calvin Klein. But I remember he showed me when I was like, I think 5 or 6, like his magazine spreads. And he was like, oh, look, I did the layout for this, or like I retouched this photo, And then by the time I was 10, he was, on Photoshop. And I'm like, what's that? And so he taught me it, and he actually got it for me. And ever since then, I was playing around with it, and really just solidified me wanting to do more with this creating. And so I always tell everyone, like, I wouldn't be a designer if it wasn't for my uncle.
I'm so glad you had an uncle like that. That's so
Yeah.
awesome. Especially when your parents probably didn't want you to go into the art field.
He was always very like, supportive of the arts, and
Yeah.
he had a daughter late in life. And I just seeing how he interacts with her and like her creativity, and always pushing her to, to push her limits with her creativeness. And like, she's doing like these plays, and she's doing like the star roles in her high school plays, and she's very into design too, and like loves talking about fonts. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like
So cool. The person you are today, I think, is just a huge testament to how like tenacity and resiliency and just being willing, like open to growing, can really do wonders for someone who has to deal with a lot of things growing up. So, thank you so much for sharing. I hope that so many people feel inspired by your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not Your Average Goat is produced and edited by yours truly, with music by Sergey Quadrado and Anton Blazov. All content is copyrighted and should not be recreated, reproduced, or reused without explicit consent. Please visit notyouraveragegoat.org/contact for questions.